call the City Council special meeting of April 27th to order. I apologize for starting it late tonight. We're gonna open up as we usually do with prayer. I'm going to ask Father Gregory Wilson if he would come to lead that, followed by the pledge. Thank you, Father.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we ask you to send your Holy Spirit upon us to guide the deliberations of this council, and that we may always reflect your love in all that we say and do, and ultimately that we may do your will. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. I'm going to ask Councilman Dewar if you'd lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. Father Wilson's with St. Mary's here in Aiken, and we appreciate all you do for our community. Thank you. We're moving right through the agenda. There's 2 items tonight. The first is approval of a resolution to participate in the Lower Savannah Regional Home Consortium. Is there a motion?
I so move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, Emery Langston, our Special Projects Coordinator, and Sabina Craig, who works with the city's Community Development Program, have recommended that the city adopt a resolution establishing and agreeing to participate in the Lower Savannah Regional Home Consortium, which opens at times to allow municipalities to join. Ms. Langston and Ms. Craig believe that it would be very beneficial for nonprofit CDCs in the city, such as Second Baptist and Friendship. Currently, because the city is not a member of the consortium, the city nonprofits can't apply for the competitive grant. Being a member of the consortium would be a complement to what we are doing with Second Baptist in Crosland and Toole Hill. It would also open up other possibilities. By joining the consortium, our partners such as Second Baptist CDC in the city could apply for home funds via a competitive grant process. It is felt this would be a great opportunity, and the city should be involved since we receive community development block grant funds and have to complete with a fair housing plan. This would not affect our present allocation of community development block grant funds that we annually receive, nor will extra staff time be needed to participate in this program since it's administered by the Lower Savannah Council of Governments. For City Council consideration is approval of a resolution establishing and agreeing to participate in the Lower Savannah Regional Home Consortium.
Thank you, Mr. Clem. And I think we have, is Jennifer Tinsley, Ms. Tinsley here? Yeah. Tinsley, would you like, I know you're part of the administration for the Lower Savannah Council of Government. Is there anything you'd like to add about what we're looking at here?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to congratulate you for considering joining the Home Consortium and tell you a little bit about the good that it can do. Currently, we have 22 members in our consortium. A lot of the municipalities are not in, but it does mean a lot for Aiken being such a large jurisdiction. You currently have an allocation of home funds through HUD, and those are entitlement funds, and you don't receive those because you don't administer a home program. By allowing those funds to go into the home consortium, that would open up the city of Aiken to our program in the home consortium that includes not only rental projects, but also homeowner rehab projects, which means we will go to single family homes and be able to bring them up to code and to rehabilitate those up to $45,000. Currently, we are receiving applications in the city of Aiken, and we have to say, no, you're not a member of our home consortium, and we cannot address those needs. So, and as Mr. Clem addressed, it does not mean any more work for the staff. In fact, it means less work for staff because joining the consortium would mean that our consolidated plan, which we already include Aiken on, would be, your plans would be consumed within that larger plan. And while we value the partnership and of course, all the input we can get from your city staff, we would be responsible at the Lower Savannah COG to be issuing those plans to HUD and getting approval of those plans. In the meantime, your CDBG program wouldn't be affected at all. So that's a standalone entitlement. You would run it as you currently do now. There's some minor administrative things that need to happen that would take 5 minutes to do. So other than that, we feel very comfortable. We've talked with your staff extensively and feel very comfortable that's a good partnership and that it would allow the city of Aiken to accept this funding really into your jurisdiction to have rental projects and homeowner rehabilitation projects in your jurisdiction.
Thank you, Ms. Tinsley. Appreciate you being here tonight, and thank you for bringing this forward to
I have
us.
a question. Jennifer, this is at no cost
Correct.
to us.
Currently, we receive a 100% grant from HUD. We have a match waiver. Generally, these funds have a 25% match, but because we're a consortium, and this also includes all 6 of the COG counties, if it was just the city of Aiken, you would have that 25%
Right.
match. Being a member of the consortium, you get that match waiver, and we expect for that to continue. I can't make any promises, but we expect that match waiver to continue because we have 6 counties that lower, well, we have higher
Because of
poverty
Allendale,
rates.
Bamberg, and Barnwell.
Correct, and the poverty rates in those counties makes the consortium eligible for that waiver. So the grants are 100% for the homeowner rehab program, and we have done some rental that's 100%, although we can't extend a lot of funding that way, but for smaller projects we can.
What's the smallest project and the largest project?
Well, the smallest project will be our homeowner rehab, which is up to $45,000, so it's anywhere up to $45,000. The largest project we funded was $321,000 for 4-unit duplex rental unit, new construction in Orangeburg.
Okay.
Is this an ongoing relationship? Would you have to keep coming back, or?
This is a 3-year renewal, so after this, I'll be just going through Mr. Clem to do the necessary paperwork for you to continue to be in the consortium. Unless you decide to back out, then you would have to have some documentation for that, but if you want to continue, it's a automatic renewal. So every 3 years we renew. That's why it's a timely matter, because if you don't renew now, you'd have to wait 3 years to join the consortium. So no, it's automatic after this. So I wouldn't be having to come up. I'll come anytime you want me
Oh,
to. I
mind
wouldn't have
seeing you,
to.
I'm just asking.
No, it's automatic renewal. So
Okay, thank you.
Quick question also. Just to, I think I got it understood to a degree, but how does one take advantage? How would a property owner take advantage of this? Do they contact you? Just if you would walk me through briefly that.
sure, very briefly, it's a little complex, and we would work with your staff to make referrals. But we do have a referral form that we give to social service agencies, and say like Lower Savannah COG can make the internal referrals as well, and the city can help with that too. If a homeowner needs repairs, they must have that referral form filled. The requirements are that they have to own their own home. They can be making mortgage payments on it, but it can't be an heir property. It can't be a manufactured home or mobile home.
You said air property?
Heir property is in multiple people on the deed who do not live in the
air,
house.
H-E-I, okay. I
Yeah,
thought
H-E-I-R,
like breathing air, okay.
Not Airbnb.
Yeah.
And they have to live in the house the last 3 consecutive years. So there are, and then of course the income qualifications, which we are at the maximum of our income qualifications is 80% of the area median income. Normally we do in the range of 30 to 50% of the median area median income, though. It's usually pretty low income persons who take advantage of it.
But you also mentioned something about rental. Is it something for improvements for rental property?
Rental is a competitive process, so we have what's called CHODOs, Community Housing Development Organizations, and we certify those through the consortium. So it's a process that they have to go to be certified, and 15% of our funds, which are on your handout, you can kind of see the breakdown of our funding for 2016. That CHODO set aside, that 15% is set aside just for those entities, and we have 2 right now. However, you do have some CDCs that would probably be eligible for that
You
status.
say you
So
have 2 right now. You're talking about 2 in Aiken?
we have 2 in our consortium. We have 1 in
Consortium.
Orangeburg and 1 in Denmark.
Okay. All right, I just had noticed the reference to Second Baptist and Friendship.
Correct, and
is that-
they could possibly be a CHOTO, and they could be eligible for those set-aside funds. They would still have to turn in an application, and it's still competitive, but we do set aside those funds for rental CHOTOs.
Okay.
They also would be eligible for operating funds, which we now divide as $32,000 a year between our 2 CHOTOs that we have. So if they become a CHOTO, that would be divided 3 ways, or however many CHOTOs we have, and that's just for daily operations for those entities.
Well, I want to thank you, and I also want to thank Emery and Sabina for helping bring this forward. It sounds,
And the mayor.
and the mayor. It sounds very interesting and promising.
Thank you. Mayor.
Jennifer, one more question,
Yes, ma'am.
at least for me. You said Lower Savannah Council on Governments and DSS are the 2 places that can make referrals. Do you have a list of any others that we can have?
We have a list of general referral agencies. The CDCs can make referrals, Second Baptist can make referrals. In fact, our CDCs have been really great about receiving these applications because they're seeing the people that need the help. So they bring those applications to us, and I would say the majority of our applications for homeowner rehab come from our CDCs, the CHOTOs, and just, community development organizations that don't have CHOTO status.
Thank you.
Jennifer, this is a little bit off the beaten path. We have a few more minutes, Mr. Mayor. Can you share some other things, projects you're working on as well across these counties, facilities you built?
Are you referring to the EDA project?
Yes.
Yes. We do run an Economic Development Administration program, which provides funding to certain projects that provide capital investment and create jobs in the region. Our last 2 awards for EDA were OC Tech received almost $2 million for a nursing facility. The Aiken Tech new Center for Energy and Advanced Manufacturing was $2.6 million from EDA. So we're doing some spreading that around a little bit too. But they do have some funding available, and I talk with Will Williams a lot on what projects we can kind of fit in that funding right now. So yeah, we're working on that. So.
Well, thank you for
Thank you.
all you do,
Thank you.
and appreciate you being here tonight.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the audience? Any other comments or questions from council? Okay. All those in favor on the motion? And that's unanimous. Jennifer, we look forward to working with you on that project. Thank you. Number 2 on the agenda, our new business. This is approval of SCDOT municipal agreement for rebuilding York Street bridges. Is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, and maybe the city attorney can tell me if we may need to suspend the rules to do this, but I was interested in making a motion to possibly hear from both SCDOT and maybe folks in the audience, and then entering an executive session to have a discussion. This being a contractual matter, I believe it would be eligible for executive session. But I'd like, before doing that, I'd like to have the opportunity to have heard from the representatives of DOT, as well as maybe some of the interested parties in the audience. Would that require suspension of the rules to go ahead with the public comment?
If you're not going to move to approve this contract or deny the contract, then council, I think, would need to vote to suspend the rules and then go ahead and allow SCDOT to talk, and then if council wants to go into executive session, you can make that motion at the appropriate time.
That's my goal. So my first motion now would be to suspend the rules so as to go
Allow
ahead
public hearing on the item?
Yeah, to go ahead and allow public comment and SCDOT's comments, and then we can, pursuant to that, we can have a motion for action or go to executive
I'll
session.
second the motion to suspend the rules.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to suspend the rules to have public hearing on this item at this time. There's no other discussion, it's just a vote. So all those in favor of suspending the rules? And that's unanimous. Okay, can we have Michelle, hey, if we could have SCDOT come up and maybe speak a little bit about what we're proposing tonight?
I just wanted to say to Michelle, it's great to see you again.
Likewise.
It's been a while.
Always great.
Thank you all for this opportunity. On behalf of SCDOT, we are very excited about getting to this point. And this is actually my first time coming before this body, so
We'll be kind.
thank you. I appreciate
We're all a
that.
bunch of teddy bears.
But as you all know, the reason we're here tonight, we're requesting municipal consent for the York Street Bridge project over Norfolk Southern Railroad. There's dual bridges there. We were pleased with the public meeting that was held on March 31st, which happened to be my birthday. And we had about 43 people that came out for the meeting, and which was a good turnout. There were a good many comments that were received. Our number one comment had to do with as you all may or may not be familiar with, there's a cut through or a median crossover on the north end of the bridges, and that was the main comment we got in terms of maintaining that, because the current design was requiring that it would no longer be there. So we actually have already been able to address that comment. So that is actually going to be changed as part of the design. We also got about 15% of the comments had to do with the grade increase. That was an issue with respect to the impacts that will result to adjacent properties. Of course, based on our design, that we did everything we could to minimize that as much as possible. So that is not something that we would be able to address as part of the project. Relative to just the total comments we received, there were about 35 comments in all. Just for more numbers or stats, 17 of those overall we are in the process of addressing. I mentioned the median crossover that will be addressed. There's a track 21. There is a property owner that has a existing drive and a gate entrance that will be relocated or has requested be relocated as part of the project. That was a comment, and we are addressing that as well as there were several other comments regarding that specific property that we're in the process of addressing. One comment, just to give another example of comments that we're addressing, there was a request that the bridges be replaced quickly. As you all know, due to the closure of the northbound bridge, we've been directed to accelerate the schedule as much as possible. So initially, I'd say prior to the closure, the letting schedule was for a December letting. That schedule has now been accelerated to a July letting. And based on our communication with the public and other representatives, my discussions with Stuart, and even you all being gracious enough to have us the special forum tonight, the municipal agreement is sort of the next big milestone to help us maintain that schedule and keep the project on this course. With that July letting schedule, it's quite an effort to get the plans and all that development coordinated and reviewed and ready to package to be able to get those bids, receive bids, and request bids. So
this is July 2016.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we are under quite an accelerated, yes. But at the same time, this is a big part of that process and is very helpful to us, tonight's meeting. But with that, as far as DOT and where we are and with the project, we're very pleased with being able to get to this point and where we are going forward. We hope that council feels the same way and that we are able to move forward with a municipal agreement tonight.
Any questions for Michelle at this time?
Could ask a question. Based on the schedule as you currently have it, configured with that July letting that you're talking about. When would you need to have this agreement finalized, accepted and finalized?
By May 1st.
By May 1st?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and would any delay in that be sort of a one-to-one relationship? In other words, if it was agreed to by May 15th, would that mean that 15 days, you'd be letting the project 15 days later than you otherwise would have been?
Right. Based on the schedule, we've got, and it literally is like 2 to 3 days between milestones. That's how tight this is. But we're scheduled to receive our final plans from our design consultant, Davis and Floyd, who's here tonight on April 28th, that's actually tomorrow. There's a 7-day window for our internal engineering staff to review those plans, and at that time, we would then be submitting our final plans bid package, which goes to our letting preparations office for them to then begin to prepare for the bid.
Releasing the bids.
Right. That process has to start, there has to be lead time there because the advertisement would have to go out. So to answer your question, you were saying May 15th.
I'm just arbitrarily saying that date. You know, if it was 15 days
Right.
later signing this agreement, does it add 15 days to that project?
Yeah, I think the drop dead, based on our schedule, because we would not, without that municipal agreement, we would not be able to obligate construction funds to advance the project to construction. So that, like June is that time frame for that. But we were wanting to have the municipal agreement to be able to advance the project, typically with right-of-way. Typically, when we have right-of-way required, that milestone comes ahead of the construction obligation. So in this case, we have a little bit of time to work with, but we've communicated May 1st, so that's
I'm with you.
what we would
Yeah.
prefer to.
That's- yeah.
Michelle, with the accelerated plan that you have, when would you expect to complete the building of the bridge?
We're targeting December of this year. So calendar year 2016, we're talking about a 4-month construction schedule. So, I mean, this is, again,
Really accelerated.
right, again, because of the closure of one of the bridges.
Was that accelerated schedule, I've got to figure out a way to ask this. At whose request was that accelerated schedule determined? In other words, I mean, did we, maybe I've forgotten, but did we send a request to accelerate that
We have,
that way?
we've been in close communication with Senator Young as well as our senior staff.
I knew that.
That channel
Yeah.
has been.
We met with them in Columbia, with DOT and Senator Setzler, Senator Young.
I was there.
Representative Wells, yeah, you were there. So that's, I thought, when we asked that it be,
No, it was already fast-tracked before that point. This same schedule that she's discussing was outlined to us at that time.
I think our delegation, I mean, I think you're right, I think our delegation and having our Senate, particularly on the Senate side, has kind of moved this forward.
Well, and there's, because of the concerns
Sure,
by some of our
absolutely.
businesses,
Yes,
saying
ma'am.
that they've been impacted with the closures, so.
Absolutely.
With those complaints coming in.
Right. Okay, in looking at the agreement itself, it makes reference to utilities being relocated. And it says that those would be done at the utilities expense, wherever the utilities might be in the right-of-way that would be affected by the project. Does that mean for water and sewer lines and meters and anything else that the city has in the ground in those places on these properties or between these properties, that the city would incur the expense of relocating all those things?
If the city does not have prior rights.
Prior rights, meaning if they don't already exist?
Right, if the utility was not there.
So if
like
there's already a
it's-
water line, then
Well, by definition, prior rights would mean that if it's in our right-of-way, if the utility was there before we were, and the utility is able to prove that,
Okay,
but with
so before it ever
documentation.
became your right-of-way. So the
Correct.
existing water meters, water lines, gas lines, phone lines, everything else, the city for our portion, phone company, power company, everybody else would have to dig it all up at our expense, let y'all do your work, and put it all back at our expense. Is that right?
Unless you can document that you have prior rights.
Those rights of way, I think, go back well before a lot of these other things do.
Right.
I would have to assume. So the short answer is yes, it would be on our dime.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I've got some other questions, but I'm going to defer momentarily to my colleagues for any other questions.
Any other questions from council?
Your height is higher now than it was at our last meeting?
No, sir, absolutely not.
Okay.
Right, nothing has changed other than comments that we're addressing, like I mentioned.
The height's the same now that it was on March 31st?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
It seems like we were talking about 22 feet plus for clearance for the railroad to go by. Has the railroad agreed to the 21-foot clearance now?
Yes, sir. Thanks to Senator Young, he was able to negotiate a memorandum of understanding with the railway, and the grade or vertical clearance, the minimum or maximum vertical clearance that we're able to do is 21 feet.
Now, how much higher, I mean, you're creating a 3.5-foot ramp basically to cross over. What is the current clearance? Do you know offhand?
You mentioned a ramp.
Well, it's 3.5 feet higher than the existing structure.
Yes, sir.
To get there, you've got to have a ramp of some sort. But what I'm interested in, what is the current clearance of the bridge over the railroad track?
I believe it's 20 feet, 3 inches.
That's right.
Now, do we need 3.5 feet to compensate for that extra 1.5 or whatever,
For that extra 9 inches.
extra 9 inches?
To clear 9 inches, you're adding 3 feet 9 inches, I think it is.
Well, you're the constructor, does that make sense?
Well, the engineer's sitting there. And,
You want to?
no,
You're
not
welcome. You're
not to
welcome.
me, not engineer.
Michelle, if you want to have your
Sure,
design
yeah.
come out,
Eric,
that'd be
would you
fine.
like to?
Each corner of the bridge is independent of itself, so there's not one elevation that we can say the whole bridge. So one corner is about 2.3 feet, one's about 2.5. The largest grade differential between existing bridge grade and proposed bridge grade is about 2.8 feet. So it's less than 3 feet. There's about 9 inches, as Michelle mentioned, between what the existing vertical clearance is versus what it has to be in the end. The rest of the difference is made up in the structural depth of the bridge to build the bridge to standards. But never more than 3, it's less than 3 feet all the way across the bridge.
Oh, okay.
So the driving surface, because this is a little bit different than I thought what you had told me at our meeting in March. The driving surface at any point on that bridge is no more than 2 point some odd feet higher than it is now.
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay. But then the difference, once you come off that bridge, I distinctly remember you telling me, especially on the north side of the northbound bridge, would be about 2.9 feet higher, or 2 feet 9 inches higher.
That is the northeast quadrant is the highest differential.
So you're adding close to 3 feet of dirt.
That's correct.
Okay. And you're adding close to 3 feet of dirt, but you've got a little bit less than that of actually elevation change on the surface of the bridge itself. In other words, you've gone up 2.6 feet on the bridge surface, but 2.9 feet or 2 feet 9 inches on the dirt. I mean, that's not really a real critical point. It's just that basically you're adding close to 3 feet of grade in front of Mr. Missiag's property.
Well, to me, it seems like the bridge is going to be almost 2 feet thicker, if you will, from top to bottom. You know, if you do the math, you
It
said it
is.
was 20 feet and some odd inches. Now you're going up to 21 feet, you know, which is within a foot. But yet, you're actually adding 2.9 feet or something to that effect. So is the bridge thicker, or is there actually more clearance?
The bridge is going to be a thicker depth, will be a deeper structure than it is currently. That's correct, yes, sir.
And that's 80,000 pounds that it will be able to carry?
That is the typical SCDOT standard load. It will actually be able to carry more than that, but it will not be load restricted. Right now, it is load restricted. You cannot take fire trucks across it. You should not be driving school buses across it. EMT vehicles are too heavy to go across it. It is a safety issue.
Right.
And once the bridge is replaced, the way it will be designed, that will not be a problem anymore for those type of emergency vehicles to go across that bridge.
What's the load number now?
It's a 3-ton gross limit right now,
3-ton.
2,000 pounds.
The comments that I've been receiving from some of the community members are asking for more of a 12,000 pound capacity versus an 80,000, and they're questioning why the need for an 80,000 weight capacity.
Yes, we have not received any request in writing, you know, from the city. I know you're saying that you had received, this came from a citizen. We had discussed the possibility internally and as well as with FHWA. Based on our discussions, FHWA nor SCDOT.
What's the FHWA?
I'm sorry, the
Okay.
Federal Highway Administration.
Okay.
We would not be able to participate in funding of a bridge on our state highway system that didn't, you know, in the construction, the maintenance, and the design of a bridge that did not meet the state legal load limit, which is 80,000 pounds.
Okay.
And that has everything to do with, it's a public road, and we would own it.
Liability?
Right, liability, as well as we're restricting part of the motoring public from utilizing it. So that's the sticking point.
Okay.
But that would mean
is that-
that more, you can expect more larger vehicles coming through that area, across that bridge now, after you complete your construction,
I think they're using it now.
Yeah.
but not.
Michelle, is that to say that no bridge in the recent history of funding by SCDOT and no bridge in the future funding of SCDOT will ever be designed or built to a spec any different than what is being proposed for these ever past or ever future? Is that what you're saying?
All I can say to that is, at this time, we are not able.
As of May 27th, 2016 in the city of Aiken.
Again.
In other words, whatever exceptions might have been granted to others and whatever in the past or whatever exceptions might be granted to others in the future really have no bearing on this today.
I think your colleagues are.
He's the engineer. He's not going to answer that.
My firm has designed multiple bridges for the Department of Transportation across the state of South Carolina. We have never designed anything less. We've never designed a bridge that would be load restricted from day one. That has never been an option for the DOT or our firm. Matter of fact, this wooden bridge structure that's being designed for the city of Aiken is very unique in of itself. The Department of Transportation, we've talked to them, they've never built a wooden bridge on the SCDOT highway system. This is being done for the city of Aiken at their request.
Well, it's a concrete bridge with wood surface. Is that
So
fair?
actually, it'll be a,
Because I'm not trying to split hairs. I just want to be clear on this.
it's actually multiple things. There will be concrete piles
Right.
in the ground that you will not see.
Yeah.
There will be steel beams under the wooden decking. There will be wooden decking and then a wooden riding surface to try to make it look as similar as it is today.
Yeah.
Context-sensitive design has been utilized on this project to try to assist the city of Aiken in maintain that character of that existing roadway.
Yeah. And for that, we're very grateful. I just have to question, I can't help but, the curious and skeptical person in me has to question, whether all the bridges that DOT's funded, past, present, and future, all meet that same standard. I mean, I see a lot of bridges as I drive around, and granted, some of them may be grandfathered from days gone by, but it's just still hard to fathom that none of them are built to a standard any less than 80,000 feet, 80,000 pounds capacity, X number of axles and so forth and so on. All the different criteria of which there's more than just the load capacity, as the engineer could describe better than I. But that's a hard pill to swallow. Especially, there's people in the audience that we probably should hear from, but they can say it better than me. But these bridges, have, to some degree, been called bridges to nowhere, because these roads, essentially, they're neighborhood bridges for all intents and purposes, and these roads terminate within a couple of blocks of where they exist. They also happen to be probably four of the most historic structures this town's got. We're just one little town in this state, but we're pretty proud of it. And these are four of the most historic structures, because these are four things that let people get over the railroad cut, which was the reason that this town exists. This town was named after the president of the railroad. And so if there's anything that is, sacred, at least from people like me who value that history, it's that railroad and the path over and across that railroad, and the track, and it's just hard to give up that history just because there's a book somewhere that says you got to do it 80,000 pounds, period. It's just, it's hard to swallow. And especially if I had reason to believe, and there's a lot of research that's been done on this, but if I had reason to believe that same standard wasn't applied with absolute unaccepted consistency throughout America. Because that's what, up until tonight, the company line is we would not be able to participate in funding of a bridge that does not meet the state legal load limit. Up until tonight, and on March 31st, you and Mr. Young and others pointed the finger at the feds and said, this is 80% of the money is coming from them, and this is the reason we can't do it, And so, by that measure, then we should be comparing this. If it's a federal limit that we're dealing with, then we should be comparing this to what's been done federally. If it's a state limit that we're dealing with, which is a little bit different than what we were told on March 31st, but if it's a state limitation that we're dealing with, then we need to be able to look at this and compare that standard to what's been done past, present, and future statewide. And I hear what the gentleman from Davis and Floyd, whom I have a lot of respect for, I've known that firm and had a world of both respect and good experience with them in every interaction, but I still have to wonder about the application of this standard for these bridges, neighborhood bridges, that aren't interstate bridges, that aren't thoroughfares, that aren't arterial bridges, that probably should be better policed to keep these big trucks off of them. And these heavy weights and loads off of them, regardless of how they're designed or built, because we don't want 18-wheelers, going through, making wide turns and going through people's front yards in these residential areas, or going through places of business as they make these swinging large wide turns. So maybe they could be better policed, but still they're not bridges for I-20, and they're not bridges for transport of goods between the north side of Aiken and the south side of Aiken. These are bridges that I take my kids to school on, and these are bridges that people both walk their dogs across and teach their kids to work the clutch of their car on because of the slope of the bridge. That's what my sister and I did when we learned to drive in a 4-speed. And we're talking about an impact on that history, an impact on the present, and an impact on the future. And it's just hard to swallow for some of us. I may be an island here by myself, but it's hard to swallow.
Well, I don't think you're saying that you're restricting us. We can do whatever we want to, but it's just that DOT will not fund it if we chose to do what we want to do.
Nor FHWA, that is correct.
Right. So there's nothing stopping us from doing.
What my initial question there was, has FHWA or SCDOT funded other bridge projects that had exceptions? And I happen to know as a statement of fact that there's a process, at least at the federal level, I don't know about at the state level, but at least at the federal level, for making just such exceptions. And so I don't think you can universally say that they don't fund projects that have load restrictions or other restrictions on them.
Are you all familiar with that federal law? You are?
We are, yes, absolutely.
Does the state ever build a road without FHWA funding?
We do. We have local funded projects.
But do you build it to FHWA specs, or do you have your own specs depending
There
on
are
the usage?
state standards that we have to go by at a minimum, and then that could be,
What's the load limit?
well, the load limit, we would still defer to the same load limit. That is a state legal load limit.
Has anyone else ever questioned at the level that we're questioning in terms of the differences in having a bridge in the community versus a more widespread public bridge like on the interstate that gets huge volumes of traffic?
In my 16 years with DOT, no. And typically, people want to feel safe. They want a safe structure that will accommodate. So that type of request, I would think most people would prefer to know that bridge has been constructed to carry whatever the load is necessary.
Yeah, I just wanted out of the way.
And then any restrictions that may need to come from another outside source. Because, you all were familiar with what happened at the Union Street Bridge very recently. There was, and that's already load restricted, but there was a large tractor trailer truck that got hung up on that bridge and should not have been there. So the issue is that there's really no way to restrict it, fully proof. So you're really setting yourself up for a potential issue, safety issue.
All right, any other questions from Michelle? Maybe we could have some of our other audience members speak at this time.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Michelle, thank you. Yes, sir, if you would.
Can I speak?
From here, if you would, just, if you don't mind, you're saying your name and your address for the record.
My name is Albert Jabert Kennedy. Jabert Kennedy. I live at 223 Union Street, right by the High Bridge on Union Street. I am concerned about the accepting the 80,000-pound limit as a de facto requirement. And because of the way that drives these grades and approaches, it's some difficulty for some of the people in the audience, even on the relatively modest grade of several feet on York Street. But when you carry this over to Fairfield, it'll be 6 or 7 feet. And we carry it to Union Street, it's 13 feet. Looking out my front door, a 13-foot interstate wall. So I look at a letter here that came from Mr. Mitchell D. Metz, Director of Pre-Construction at SCDOT. I believe you were on distribution for this letter. And in part, talking about the Fairfield Street Bridge, he says, currently this bridge, the Fairfield Bridge, is posted at 4 tons per axle, 6 tons gross. We would recommend a higher limit than the current posting, but less than the legal load rate. That was in 2015. It was possible from SCDOT. And now it's become not possible. I look at the I'm not an expert on civil engineering. I'm an electrical engineer, but I don't know much about building bridges, so I must confess some degree of ignorance. But I looked up the 23 Code of Federal Regulations 625, which deals with Federal Highway Administration design standards for highways, and I see a paragraph. The STA, State Transportation Authority, and local agencies may consider using design exceptions to achieve a design that balances project and user needs, performance, cost, and environmental implication, and community values. So exceptions are available. Further down it says, STAs, state transportation agencies, and local agencies may consider designs that deviate from the design standards when warranted based on the project's impact on the environmental, natural and built, historical, recreation facilities, and other factors. So if my reading of the CFR is correct, it is possible to have exceptions for just the kinds of cases we're talking about here. I agree fire engines need to get over there. I don't know that United Van Lines needs to get over that bridge, fire trucks rather. And I saw an email that came today from John Hardy, the commissioner, and basically he says 80,000 is the what we want. It's a legal load limit. That's all there is to it. It's going to be 80,000. And I think this is just a statement by fiat that that's the way it has to be, which does not seem to my plain reading of the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, as necessarily having to be that way. And I think in a case where we're dealing with residential bridges, I think that some exception should be different than what you require on an approach to an interstate. Thank you for letting me have my say.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in the audience care to speak?
Good evening, Pat Cunning, 113 Mulberry. Just want to comment that for 6 years on the city council, you never let me say a prayer. Just wanted to comment about that. my pre-show's up and he gets to say a prayer, so.
Add that to your
I just
list,
had to
Rick.
say that, Mr. Mayor.
Put him on the next agenda.
And I apologize for not making the March 31st, but I find it hard to believe that there wasn't any comment about losing 16 parking spaces on this plan. Everybody knows that, right? Losing 16 parking spaces, 8 on one side and 8 on the other. If you talk about something that's going to affect the business people, it's that parking, and also it affects the church. That's why Father asked me to come up here and speak. But is there any way to mitigate that we could somehow have some parking on both sides? It just seems to me there's got to be a way to where you can get parking on both sides of that street. Because I think that's our main concern, is the fact when you have court in session and you have a funeral at the church, and Lord knows people, we talk about parking downtown every other meeting here, and we're like that, losing 16 parking spaces. Somebody should have brought it up, and I find it hard to believe that it was never mentioned. So that's my main concern, and we all understand that y'all are in a rough spot here. We understand that it's got to be built. We need to have it built quickly. But if there are ways to mitigate that aspect of it, we need to look at it. And I would strongly suggest that happen, because the poor gentleman that has a business there, you lose 16 parking spaces, and we all talking about small business, that's pretty hard to overcome. So that's my main comment, unless, Father, you want to say another prayer that we can try to get things done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Is that anything we could ask the question of? Is there any thought, or is there a potential that we could look at the parking situation?
Sure, and I apologize, I neglected to mention earlier, that was actually the number 3 comment that we received, second to the first comment I mentioned was the turnaround, the cut through. The second one was the grade, and then that was number 3. What we could do, and what is proposed and what was shown on the plans at the public meeting was, you may recall, we just had striping, which would allow parallel parking along any portion, towards the outside of those lanes in either direction. So as he mentioned, there would be no potential for parking on the inside based on our current design. What we were planning to do per previous meetings we've had, one of which was the one of the meetings we had actually here with the city, was to coordinate if we needed to do actual spaces as opposed to that striping that we're showing now. Again, coordinate with the city, that is. So if you count space for space, I believe the current design actually allows for, and again, we haven't done the math, but you would be able to, you have the same number of spaces in the after that you do now, based on the current design. It's just not delineated spaces.
Well, there's spaces on both sides of the road now, on both the north and southbound, on the north side of York, on both the north and southbound lane, there's spaces on both sides of the road, right?
On the north side, absolutely. But on the south end of the project, there are no spaces. So what
And
our
some of them are diagonal on the eastern edge of the northbound lane of York, on the north side of the cut, in front of Mr. Messiag's store. Aren't those diagonal parking spaces now?
Yes, sir.
So doing away with one side of the road's parking spaces and getting rid of the diagonal and putting in only parallel on just one side of the road, you still have the same number of parking spaces?
Well, I'm saying by the time, taking into account that there are no spaces on either side on the south end of the project, no spaces.
So you're counting, you're putting cars parked all the way back down to Colleton Avenue
That's correct.
in front of the apartment building that Mr. Anaclerio owns and all those, and just have parallel parking there. Still nothing on the inside, on the Parkway
Right.
side, but on the outside where the homes and church and all that, okay.
Yes.
All right, and that works out to almost even distribution of parking spaces.
Right, I mean, we haven't done the math, but just by inspection.
Yeah, honest guess, you think it's pretty close?
Yes.
Okay.
Would it still be at 16 parking spaces? If you did
There-
it that way?
There are 16 now, you're saying?
Now, there's more than that now. There's more than
But
16
you were
now.
going to eliminate 16 before, weren't you?
I believe we're eliminating 6 spaces.
How many?
How many?
It changes the,
It's 16.
Which is still 16, you put back almost that many, I don't know if it's 16 or if it's 13 on the south side, on both outsides, where there's no parking delineated.
But-
That's correct.
on the south side of the bridge, and then you're converting the diagonal spaces in front of Mr. Messiag's store into parallel.
I'm confused.
At least the
Yes.
drawing shows that.
Yes.
So that would give up more spaces, because diagonal, you can get 2 for every 18 feet versus 1 for every 20 to 21 feet on a parallel spot.
But you only have 3 of those, most of them are parallel, 300.
Okay, so there's only 3 diagonal right now? Okay, so that's not a big loss on those, but it's putting cars, requiring cars to park on the other side of the railroad cut from where they are now to make the equivalency.
The only issue you got with that is to go on the south side, all of those, 3 of those homes are residential.
Everything on the south side is residential.
Everything on the south side, the apartments is not a big deal, the residential people probably have an issue with it.
I think there's a gentleman in the back that wants to speak, but I'm going to have some more questions for the engineer before we're done.
All right. I'm going to recognize this gentleman over here, please, sir. Yeah.
I just have 2 questions.
Come on up here and state your name and
Hello again.
address.
I'm Michelle. Phil Johnston, 232 Union Street.
And Mr. Johnston.
A year ago, you guys gave us approximate numbers.
Mr. Johnston, I need you to address me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
A year ago, the Highway Department gave us approximate numbers that the grade would be raised on each bridge approximately 2 feet. They followed up in writing approximately 2 feet. I gave council that information in a bunch of our sessions and so forth, and you guys based a lot of decisions and requests on those numbers. They followed up with a letter subsequently, approximately 2 feet. Now, I realize things change, but at the meeting a month ago, Randall Young told us it was about 3.5 feet plus the 6 inches that Tom Young got for us. Can I face them? Did you tell us, I want to be sure I got this right, that at the top of each bridge, it will be no more than 2.9. That's what you're saying tonight.
If I was to stand,
I mean, I just want to get it clarified, because the numbers change
Yeah,
every
I
time.
understand,
Right.
I understand.
And I'm not knocking at you, I just
no,
want to get it
I want to be,
Yeah.
consider each individual corner of the bridge is independent. So you've got the beginning and end of each bridge, 4 locations. If I was to stand in the center of the beginning and the end of all 4 of those locations, none of those locations would be higher than 2.9 feet from the existing
So
condition.
that's the highest, 2.9, and that's a number you can assure council.
I can say that with clarity.
And maybe if you really sharpen your pen, you get a little less.
No, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that. I will not say that.
Okay, I got that, 2.9.
That's at the end of the bridge, center of the bridge.
No place on the bridge is it going to be more than 2.9,
On the bridge, that's correct.
on the bridge.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think I understand now.
Okay.
All right.
And you had another comment too, didn't you?
Yeah, and Michelle, I just want to find out, you said something when we were talking about the 80,000 pound limit, about all these heavy equipment and trucks that have to go through there. Does this nullify councils or the city ordinance where we don't allow these big trucks into those neighborhoods? In other words, if we allow you to build a bridge for 80,000 pounds, is all that now moot? I'll sit down, maybe the attorney can answer that.
And I will ask our attorney to answer, but I think city ordinances would still stay in place. But yeah, it would not change that, Mr. Johnson. Thank you. Yes, sir, absolutely.
Thomas Yag, 218 York Street, southeast, the store there.
Business that
Just-
is affected probably the most by it.
Right.
as far as the business.
I've been considering and listening to everything for a long time. This morning, I came to another decision about what I think should be done. I might be the only one in favor of it. That is to make it a walking bridge or get rid of the bridge if they need more height. Just make it like a Grand Canyon. I'm going to be suffering during the construction. I'm suffering now because of the bridge is closed, and I don't think I'll be any better off by the time the bridge is finished, considering the runoff of the rain, the extra grading, and it just is a bad deal all the way around. I think we would, and then if everybody's talking about, oh, we got all this free state money and all this free federal money, but we're still going to be paying for it. Doesn't matter where the money comes from, it's still out of our pockets. It ain't free. There ain't no free lunch. I'm in favor of either getting rid of the bridge or make it a walking bridge only.
All right, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for speaking. Yes, sir, in the back.
Good evening. My name is Keith Darr, and I am a resident at 239 York Street Southeast. And so the bridge is where it comes across is right in front of where we've resided for about the last 20 years. First of all, I do appreciate actually the council's actions to look at this project very closely. The engineering firm has been actually I appreciate that they've taken the time to explain where this process is going. But I do have to say that it was only from the last meeting that my wife attended where I came to understand that the reason for raising the bridge height was due to the load-bearing capacity issue. I thought it was at first because of the train going underneath. But given that information, the gentleman here, Mr. Mary, I think his reference to the fact that we would be building an interstate type bridge in the historic district of Aiken does beg the question of whether there is an appeals process, a process for seeking a variance for that kind of structure to replace, as I understand it, the current bridge, the wooden bridge, has the capacity of 3 tons, if I'm correct. That's 6,000 pounds. And to go by more than a magnitude of 10 times that to 80,000 for a load-bearing bridge does seem to beg for the opportunity to have a variance considered. So I would hope that we would, I know that timing and money and all of that can be in play, but I would say that before we spend that kind of money, even the suggestion, do we even need a bridge? If that's the worry that we would have a misdirected vehicle head that direction, I'd say we even consider that. But so that would be my request, that if it's possible to pursue a variance, that we at least pursue that channel and get a ruling on that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Can anybody answer the question? We all saw the picture, I think, of that United moving truck on the bridge. How much weight does that?
I spoke to the driver about that very thing. He's legally allowed to carry 80,000 between his weight of his truck and his load is 80,000, but he said the truck's actual capacity, if he loaded it fully, is 90,000.
Okay.
But it was empty. The one this past Sunday was empty at the time it got stuck.
Yeah, but a fully weighted truck could be as high as 90?
There's actually, I've got the chart here to show you how they calculate it, but based on your number of axles and the spacing between the axles and everything else, the most that you're legally allowed by the feds to transport across public, federal or state roads is 80,000 pounds.
And we currently have 6. I mean, it sounds like it's okay for a pickup.
But,
But what does 6,000 get us? Is that what we have now? Is that what I'm hearing? So what does that get us? So for example,
My truck is 4,000.
and does that get us a trash truck?
now, a trash truck's too heavy. A trash truck can be 64,000 pounds or so.
Wow.
Maybe 72,000 pounds.
I don't mean to make light of it, but it just sounds ridiculous to,
Steve, I see. Hold on a second.
6,000 is the current basis.
Michelle, is there an appeals process in that? I don't know that it exists, but that question came up.
Mayor, can I ask a quick question which is directly in line with what you're saying? Is there a corresponding reduction in cost when you do it for a less robust capacity, let's say 20,000 pounds or 30,000 pounds? Whatever the bridge costs. I mean, if it's 80,000, it's X. If you do it for 20,000, is there a corresponding reduction in price?
No, sir.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
A great deal of the money is actually going towards stormwater mitigation and stuff too.
Right.
I mean, that's part of the reason for your answer, because there's a lot more to this than just the bridge itself.
That's correct.
You had a question, what was, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I was going to wait till everybody
Your
finished.
question, I
Yeah,
didn't.
okay. Is there a process in place for an appeal of that sort?
Right now, what I had stated earlier about, the fact that we have discussed this as a possible, we have discussed with FHWA and our internal staff the possibility of putting in a load-restricted bridge on day one. That is not an option for this project because of the fact, what I've stated previously. It's not something that our agency would be willing to do from a funding standpoint for design, construction, and maintenance of a structure that would not meet our state legal load limit. The only recourse that there would be is if the city wanted to write a letter to a written request to our Secretary of Transportation, which would be requesting that the bridges be taken off of our state system, and then the city would then be able to put in a load-restricted bridge through that avenue, upon our review of that request, obviously. But the bridges would have to be taken off of our state system. At that point, they would become the property of the city for the full design, construction, ownership, and the after. So that's the only recourse.
So there is no appeals process, let's just say that then, right?
Not public, not with regards to funding for these bridges.
The letter that was referred to by Mr. Kennedy from Mr. Metz at SCDOT specifically addressed, and I've got it here, but specifically addressed the Fairfield Street Bridge, saying that his recommendation to the city would be that that SCDOT seek lower load capacity, in essence, relief from state and federal standards. So are your answers specific to York Street only, or are you saying that SCDOT won't in the future consider any exceptions to the standards or funding for an accepted standard bridge at Fairfield and Union Street as well?
Right, well, the caveat for that option was provided that the city would maintain, own, have all future responsibility of that particular bridge after.
He specifically said that we seek, that we request from the feds and SCDOT lower capacity, I believe. I mean, we wouldn't have to request it from ourselves if we were going to own it ourselves. We'd just do it the way we wanted it if we owned it. But he was talking about making that request because the presumption would be there's somebody else who owns it that we would have to request it from. And so, I mean, if it take me a second to pull it back up, but I can read it to you maybe.
Sure, yeah. I know the letter, since I've been the program manager for this area, there was a letter written regarding the Fairfield Street Bridge, and our position in that letter was similar to what you're saying. It was basically with regards to if the city wanted to own the bridge and the after, we would construct the bridge.
Okay.
At its current.
I stand corrected. I just looked at it, and it does, I read further down the body, but backed up at the top, it does preface his comments as saying if the city is willing to own the Fairfield Street Bridge.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I stand corrected on that, and apologize. It addresses Union Street on the next page of the letter. But so what you're saying is there shall be no exception made for any of these bridges, York Street, Fairfield, or Union? Because that's really what I'm driving at with these questions. There will be no exception made as long as South Carolina funding is involved. There'll be no exception made on any of these bridges, period. Period.
I'm speaking tonight with regards to the York Street bridges.
Right. But you know, if you did grant an exception later on the Fairfield Street Bridge, we'd be saying what had happened to York.
Right.
So you're pretty much making a decision, y'all have made a decision for all these roads and all these bridges. That's your decision, SCDOT's decision.
Again, I'm speaking for York Street tonight. And of course, if the city would like to write a letter to request for the York Street bridges, because that's where we are now. We want to stick to the.
Well, and that's, I understand, and I not only recognize, but I very much respect your position on this, Michelle. I do, both as an individual and as a representative for SCDOT.
Mr. Mayor, if I may remind you, the agenda item for tonight is just for the York Street Bridge.
Right.
It's not for the other bridges.
I understand. But
that's what was advertised to the public.
Right.
I guess I'm a little concerned if we start talking about other bridges, that there would be a concern that we're outside the purpose of the advertised meeting.
Right, but I think what's germane to the York Street Bridge is whether or not there would be exceptions on anything, any other possible exceptions. If there's possible exceptions on the others, why wouldn't there be on York? I'll drop that. I mean, I'll drop it if that's what you want me to do. I'll drop it talking about Fairfield and Union for now. But you totally took me off my game. I lost my train of thought, probably to Michelle's benefit. But ultimately, I guess because I've lost my train of thought, I guess the point is that the answer is end of story. There's no exception that SCDOT is willing to consider.
That is correct.
Okay.
I've got one quick question. I earlier asked if there was any reduction in cost if the bridge was less robust. Is there a reduction in the depth of the bridge which would alleviate this 2.9 inches elevation, which seems to affect your business, the parking and so forth? Would a 20,000-pound bridge would the climb or the ramp leading up to it, would that be reduced? Would parking be more available with it?
Yeah, if the superstructure, which it sounds like you're describing, changed,
Right.
and the materials were reduced, there would be a design cost reduction comparable.
Or narrower footing or whatever you want to call it.
Yes, sir.
I'm an electrical engineer.
Right.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there-
One more question, Michelle. Just to clarify, I'm not sure I have a good understanding of those 16 parking spaces that are being lost. I don't think I understood what you said. Some of that mitigated? Are we saving some of the 16 or are all 16 lost?
The 16 are lost from the standpoint of what's there now.
Okay,
But what I was saying earlier is because there's absolutely no parking currently on the south end of the bridges, whereas the new project, we will provide the whole length of York Street has parking on both sides on the outside lane of the lanes. So I was saying, if you count all that available parking, I'm thinking that it would be a wash. Without doing any math, I'm just basing it on just knowing the length of the project and how much space you have over there, and that we're striping that whole lane where cars could park anywhere within that, along that stretch. Now, another gentleman mentioned that it's residential. So that's why we were saying that we would coordinate with the city going forward to see what is an acceptable mitigation.
okay. And is it correct, I'm also hearing from you, as nicely as I can phrase it, it's this way or the highway, so to speak. You're asking us to approve this agreement, and there's no option for any changes to the agreement unless we want to take ownership of the bridge, which I don't think we're interested in doing. There's no option but to sign the agreement to get the process moving for this bridge to get repaired.
Well, with regards to the request for a load restricted bridge, there's no options other than for the city to request to take the bridges off of our system. With regards to other items that we've been, trying to address from the public meeting and other items that have come up in other previous meetings, those things are still, we are working with the public and with the city to address those.
But you outlined a timetable that doesn't have a lot of flexibility to it. I mean,
That is absolutely
you're talking
right.
about something that's got to happen next week to get the process going.
We desperately, if we are going to let this project in July, we need this agreement signed. We would love to get it tonight or by May 1st is what's been committed to the public.
And Philip, are you comfortable with what happens at the ends of the bridges and how it impacts the residences and the church?
Not in the slightest. And that was actually going to be my next question that was where before we ever knew this 80,000 pound thing, that's where we originally were. And to some degree, give or take a few inches, we're basically still at the same elevation as far as the driving surface for York Street that we were before we got the reduction in clearance requirement from the railroad. When they were saying, once they said 23 feet, then they got it down to 21 and a half and now to 21. So essentially seen that drop 2 feet, but with the depth of the bridge, you're basically back up at the same level you were. So you're going to end up with the same impacts in terms of the approaches on both sides. And so at one point we were told that the feds would make an exception for those angles of approach, and so we could get maybe less drawn out grade change. The further that grade change, the more it's drawn out, the more of an impact for the more properties and residences. It stretches all the way across somebody's property rather than being just a few feet in front of somebody's property. Is there any possible relief for that? What he's talking about, the areas right off the bridge and how that grade is chased all the way back for so many feet in both directions?
Based on, I know we had, at the public meeting, we had gotten comments with regards to.
That was your number 2 item? The grade?
Absolutely. We would not be able to materially change anything. There might be areas like right now we're showing permissions for putting back in existing drives, the new driveways to tie down. If it were an instance where a property owner was not willing to sign a permission, for example, we may have to tie down a drive where we would normally, it would be a more gradual tying it down onto their property. We would be able to reduce an impact in that way, but we wouldn't see that as a benefit. So to answer your question, what we have now is our best, what we can do with the railroad minimum vertical clearance requirement and with our beam depth requirement. It's just the design that we have to work with, unfortunately.
All right, thank you, Michelle. I'm going to
There's Jenny and Sam, a lot of people out there.
we have three more people to speak.
Sam Erb, 1556 Dibble Road. This is scary. I mean, Lawrence Street Bridge is an overkill when it was built. I watched the whole thing being built. This is scary. We have 2 more bridges in this beautiful downtown. And no offense, but they're engineered marvels that people drive to see beautiful bridges that make long spans, short spans. And I just think if we rush into this without giving this some thought, and let's put a unique bridge that'll hold 100,000 pounds, but it will look good. And it won't affect our community. We've got to keep, I mean, when they move a block down to redo Fairfield, you're really going to have some decisions. I mean, I feel like you're being rushed into signing this so we can have this cement high-rise oval bridge over this railroad cut that I think we need to hold the brakes on and say, okay, the bridge won't be done in July, but by golly, that bridge is going to be there for hundreds of years. And you want what the Lawrence Street Bridge to look like. I mean, I don't know. I hope you don't rush into this. There are engineers out there that can do some beautiful wrought iron. Go look at some bridges on the on the internet. It's amazing.
Sam, let me say, we requested of DOT is specifically in this design that it stay in the character with the wood. And I don't think Aiken wants necessarily the wrought iron. I think
Well,
they want
I'm just,
the wood.
I apologize. I want wood. I mean,
and I know that, but I'm just
the
saying.
Union Street Bridge, I'd love
to their
to keep
credit, they
wood.
were asked to do that, and they did bring us a product back.
Right.
I mean, there's some questions that certainly we're addressing is,
Yeah.
do we need 80,000 pounds? I think that gives a lot of people some heartburn with that, but to their credit, nobody wants to see what happened with the Lawrence Street Bridge.
Yeah.
Again, I think that's in the back of, hopefully that's in the back of everybody's mind. So I wasn't gonna speak. I just wanted to come. I missed past meetings, but I just, don't jump into this. Because we gotta live with this, and our future kids have to live with this. Thank you. appreciate it, Sam. Okay, Jenny?
Hey, Jenny Stoker, 331 Kershaw Street, and I wasn't planning on speaking either, but I'm, delighted to hear all this discussion. I think we all have been sort of happy that everybody was aware that Lawrence Street was a rush job and a disaster, and so with all the meetings and Senator Young's work, it all looked great. And it looks pretty great to me. I don't want to see those big trucks. And if we have to, I don't know what a fire truck weighs, and I don't know what a garbage truck weighs, and I know they've got to go near there, so if they're too heavy, then we're going to need a turnaround. But an 80,000 pound limit, to me, is a can of worms for these residential streets that I walk on and ride my bike on, and I'm looking forward to these bridges opening back up so that I don't have to make a detour on my bike. But I absolutely don't know what the options are, and I hope that you will figure out how to not let these big trucks, if you build an 80,000 pound limit bridge, is there a way, people have kind of, danced around that tonight, is there a way to restrict trucks from coming there? Is it a weight issue that, that you can say no big trucks can go over it, even if they build it to accommodate a big truck?
Jenny, I know you know our procedures probably as well as we do. I think it's something that can be addressed by ordinance, whether it's a 3-ton or an 80,000 pound. I think that's an ordinance issue that the city would address.
But you have to understand, there are moving trucks that are coming into the city every day. There was a very large truck on Bell Reeve Drive today moving somebody out, and it was a full out. I asked him how much he had, and it was 17,500, just what he put in. Now, I don't know how that translates into a load, but I think it's kind of difficult to make a rule that say you can't have a truck in a certain part of town, because there are times when trucks need to be there.
If it's not convenient for them, if they're not supposed to be there, then maybe if it is a local, obviously if it's a local delivery, then, or a local pickup, that's one thing.
Yes,
But
yeah.
you don't want every truck coming down Whiskey Road to then go across York Street Bridge, right?
No, then what
And how
you
do you,
fight-
yeah, how do you stop them, or can you stop them?
What you then fight, Jenny, is the GPSs, because it's the GPSs that are leading a lot of these trucks to these areas. That's what happened there. And I know Chief Barranca was working on that. He told me today he's finally got a contact with Garmin, so, because they weren't aware that there was a limit on the Union Street Bridge. Now, I don't know what that truck limit on.
You told me that same.
It's a little late for that now,
Well, I understand, but
Jeez.
it's an issue we've known about, but, it's almost like trying to get Google on a telephone. If you find a secret, let us know. I mean, to try to get to the one location in town that provides, or in the country, that provides the guidance to the GPS makers, so they can update their maps and not lead the trucks into areas where they shouldn't be, is a real challenge. As I say, Chief Branco's working on it. I don't know how successful he'll be.
Well, I think I'll be banking on his success, because I think that, for me, one of my major concerns in this town is, yes, the character of the whole thing, but in my little pocket of a neighborhood, I'm standing there guard, and when I see these things that I know are opening the flood to more traffic, that then you're going to say, or somebody's going to say, well, you can't legally stop them. Well, I just want to make sure we can legally, that they will not be encouraged and they will not be allowed, and that's
There are
it's very
definitely
important.
ways to both police it better, to establish ordinances, to modify the trucker's GPS. But as Michelle correctly said, I mean, you can't stop everything all the time, every time.
That's
and
true.
So there's always going to be, whether it's a moving truck or something else, there's always going to be the chance for a very heavy vehicle to go across one of these bridges.
And maybe another idea, if it's practical, everybody seems to love these archways all over town. Maybe you incorporate a couple of short arches over those bridges, and they'll stop then. Or if they don't, they can pay for the arch, right? You could just take some of these from Newberry Street by me, because I don't think they add anything out here. So, thank you very much.
Jenny,
I
thank
may
you for
be
your
wrong, but it
comments.
seems like
All right, one more, Mr. Coward.
while he's walking up, seems to me, even back in Chief Frommer's days, I was told the fire trucks will not use the bridges.
Well, they won't use Union, I know that. Yeah, they won't use Union because they high center on Union, but I don't know about Fairfield.
I'm not sure. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Thank you. All of you have done a commendable job, I think, of working on this problem. We've been working at it for several years. I commend Senator Young, Councilman Mary, Mr. Mayor, and all of you who have really worked hard at this. One of the issues that came up, and it kind of the light went off a little bit even after I attended the public hearing on 31 March. And by the way, I apologize. I'm Bud Coward, 256 York Street, Southeast Aiken, South Carolina.
Coward.
Thank you. One of the issues, and I commend Pat for bringing up the issue of parking for the businesses that are located on the north side of the bridge. But for those of us who live on the south side of the York Street Bridge, that's correct. There is no designated parallel parking in front of my home, my neighbor's home, in front of Pat's apartment building, and the other residences that are on the other side of the street, as well as my side of the street. But on the north side of the street, you have both a combination of parallel parking and diagonal parking, 60-degree parking, if I'm not mistaken. In studying transportation engineering 40 years ago, spaces for parallel versus diagonal, you need more for parallel than you do for diagonal. But they're give and take when you do that design. What they show on their design, and I commend their design, is all parallel parking. And yes, what I think you're doing is transferring those 16 spaces from a concentrated area on the north side of the bridge to spreading those 16 spaces out over both the north and the south side of the bridge. And yes, now we will have designated parking in front of my house and the other houses in the residential section of that area that we're talking about. Up to now, I really haven't had a problem parking in front of my house, even during peak times like Aiken's Macon. And we just live with that. And that Aiken's Macon is a good thing, so we just live with it for the 2 days it's there. But to spread that parking over that whole area, I asked the city to look at that real hard, because yes, I appreciate the small businesses that are located on the north side of York Street, but to spread that over a larger space, yes, that'll work. And yes, you will equal the number of spaces, if you will, but you're just spreading that over a larger area that could create a problem for those of us who have historically been able to park without a problem in front of our house. And so I just ask y'all to look at that real hard, because those people that are frequenting the businesses on the north side, yes, they might, if they park in front of my house or any house in that neighborhood, will have a little longer place to walk or longer space to walk. And I don't serve coffee or sandwiches at my house, so they will have to walk a little longer way. But just take that into account when you sit and work out the parking spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, we're gonna call.
May I ask the engineer one question, Mr. Mayor?
Absolutely.
If I could. And this may be an unfair question. I hear you saying y'all have not designed a bridge lower than the 80,000 capacity?
Not on the state system, no, sir.
For DOT?
That's correct.
Have you designed a bridge with a lower capacity for a municipality or a county?
Not for a municipality or county, but we have done for some residential development.
Okay. And what would be the lowest capacity you would have designed a bridge for, if you know?
I'm not going to quote that tonight. I do not know off the top of my head.
All right.
But I know that we have done some lower for some residential.
But you haven't done one for a city or a county?
Not for a city
Not
or
a
county.
governmental agency?
No governmental agency, no, sir.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we go into executive session to discuss this contractual matter that's before the city this evening.
Okay, there's a motion. I'm gonna have the city attorney at this time.
Mr. Mayor, it would be appropriate for council to go into executive session pursuant to section 30-4-70A2 for discussions of negotiations incident to proposed contractual arrangements. And obviously the specific purpose of that would be to discuss the municipal state highway project agreement for the York Street dual bridges over Norfolk Southern Railroad.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Meary. Is there a second? Second from Councilwoman Price. All those in favor of
Wait,
voting?
whoa. Can I just ask this question? What negotiation are we talking about? I mean, this isn't a negotiation that we're involved in.
Determination of acceptance of an agreement, of a contract.
But it's a public, I mean, we opened this as a regular meeting.
Right.
I mean, if you're comfortable with it, the city attorney, I'll go with it, but
The Freedom of Information Act allows council to go into executive session to discuss negotiations incident to proposed contractual arrangements.
You consider this a contract that we're being asked to approve?
Oh, I do, yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, that's a point of information. There's a motion and a second. All in favor of moving into executive session at this time? And that's unanimous. Come out of executive session.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
I have Councilman Duar with a motion
All set.
and Councilman Hamoki with a second. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. And thank you, sorry for the holdup. We've had public hearing. At this time, I would like to take a motion for item 2 on our agenda. Approval of South Carolina DOT municipal agreement for rebuilding York Street bridges. Is there a motion?
I'll move.
Councilman Hamoki made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilman Duar seconded. Because we suspended our rules, we've already had public input on this, but I think council members should certainly have a right to give a comment on this. So I open it up to comment from council.
Well, it's a very reluctant approval, quite frankly. I appreciate everything that DOT has done. We appreciate the help from our delegation. There's nothing to be happy about in one respect in approving this, because it doesn't get us to where we want to get to, but I'm not sure that there are many alternatives. I just wish that DFHWA would recognize the uniqueness of the city of Aiken and our historical area and allow us to have something less than 80,000. I mean, requiring that we have the same thing that's on Highway 20 just doesn't seem to be appropriate.
Councilwoman Price?
While this may possibly pass this evening, Michelle and staff, what I'd request is that DOT take another look at neighborhoods where where bridges may exist, and to see if exceptions in the future can be considered for these communities. So that's what I request that you consider.
I think it's a no-win situation. People aren't satisfied with the 80,000 ton standard, but we know if we do not accept, then we may lose money from DOT, and we need the money.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question of one of the representatives?
Certainly.
Michelle, quick question for you. If we continued this item, asked that it be taken off the fast track and took more time before accepting the agreement, would that put an end to this project? Would it be taken off the docket and basically eliminated from any work, essentially remaining closed in depth forever?
Based on the schedule that we're pursuing now, and I know what
Can
you're...
we go back to like the normal schedule?
I understand, yeah, you're saying, but what has changed then? What are we doing? Why are we delaying? Why would we be delaying, I should say?
Because we wanted to. But
But
in order
for what
in order to further pursue, you know, a more palatable resolution for the residents, for the property owners, in order to look at what other options or possibilities are available. But all I really want to know is if it were, if the decision were not made immediately, if it were delayed by some period of time, would DOT quit on the bridge projects?
No, but the load restriction is off the table if that, for the standpoint of these projects.
Okay, but if we didn't sign this in the next 24, 36, 72 hours, 7 days, this would still be a viable project that would still be on DOT's docket, rescheduled maybe, but on DOT's docket, and it would still go forward. It wouldn't be eliminated from.
Absolutely, we're
as a
still
project.
pursuing the July letting.
And it's reasonable for us to assume that we will be, in some point in the not-too-distant future, we'll be addressing Fairfield and Union Streets?
Correct.
Okay,
In coordination with the city.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Michelle, to be upfront here, if we pursued an appeal process based on what you've said, what does that do?
For the load restriction, that delays the project indefinitely.
But what happens to the money that you have for this project?
Well, it remains, we have a state bridge program.
Okay.
So there's other bridges that are just waiting
For this money.
patiently. Oh, yeah.
That's my point, that it takes us out of the cycle because you may have another bridge, another community that would like to have this money, that would love to be moved up to make use of this money. Am I correct or not correct?
Absolutely, yeah. If we can make haste to proceed, that's the best option, if that's a possibility tonight.
Okay, Michelle, somebody read a document, probably Philip, because he's got all of the documents, but somebody read a document to the effect that FHWA does permit exceptions to the load standards under certain conditions. I mean, there were like 5 or 6 conditions. And if that statement is true, is there not a possibility of appealing for the 80,000? I mean, we don't need an 80,000. I think we can all agree with that. I mean, I understand why it's there. But if in fact they allow for exceptions, can't we apply for an exception? And what would that process be?
Right, yeah, not for these bridges. We've spoken as of today, as late as today, we've spoken with FHWA on this very subject. And DOT as well as FHWA have taken a very firm stance.
I understand. I guess I'm asking why. I mean, I could see taking a very firm stance on a bridge with a lot more traffic than we have.
Right.
But to fall on your sword on a bridge in the small town of Aiken, South Carolina, just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense if they do in fact have a provision in their manual that they will grant waivers. I mean, what is there so special about this bridge that they seem reluctant to?
We haven't asked them formally, and we haven't made the case. There's a case that you have to make, and it hadn't been made.
You can step up.
Absolutely.
I'm Michelle's assistant, Adam Humphreys. The document you were referring to are design exceptions, not load exceptions. The exceptions they make are for other things like a vertical curve exception, or like on an interstate where sometimes you can't see over the top of the curves. There's certain things that safety-wise is still acceptable, but it's not exactly standard. It's not practical, but where it's monetarily but not a safety issue, there are exceptions. But as far as loading, because it's a safety issue, that's not what the design exceptions were even really put in place for to begin with. So it wouldn't really be considered a design exception.
Okay. Well, now, the federal bridge guidelines actually does say there's 15 design exception items for which exceptions can be made. And
But he's saying design,
But
not
design
load.
exception, load
Not load
exception.
exceptions.
Let me finish.
Yes, sir.
Design exceptions, there's 15 matters of design for which exceptions could be made. Number 7 is structural capacity. That's the load. The structural capacity. Also, number 10 is the grade, the approach. And there's a set of criteria. You essentially have to go through a process of application. And among the things that are of issue, the things that they take into consideration is who is served by the bridge. As we've discussed tonight, it's residential neighborhoods. The type of the structure, the age and length of it, the condition of the existing bridge and the weight limit, but also is the bridge historic. And that's one of the areas where the exceptions have been made in a cursory amount of research. That's one of the areas where the exceptions have been made by the feds most frequently. That's not to say that they would at all do that in this case. There's no way in the world to count on that the feds would make such an exception. But unless the material that I was able to find is wrong. There's 15 potential design exceptions ranging from design speed, lane width, shoulder width, cross slope, super elevation, everything else, to grades and structural capacity. That's where I get off on this stuff. Yeah.
I would just say from my perspective as a consultant who does business with the Department of Transportation, they highly discourage design exceptions. That is something that it's for like a Congress, it's kind of like getting that to get the DOT to pass design exceptions for simple things like a speed limit in an area, proposed profile grade being a little bit steeper, reducing speeds so that you can have steeper grades in areas where they don't want to do that typically, in a rolling terrain versus a mountainous terrain type considerations. So there are design exceptions. There is a process for the DOT to evaluate them, but it is not by any means of the imagination a standard. It's an exception for a reason, and it would have to be truly, truly exceptional for them to take that on. It's just not something that they look at or take lightly at all.
Didn't we get one in some ways because of the character with the use of the wood?
Exactly. This is the only wooden bridge that will be on the DOT system. There's no other wooden bridge on the DOT system in the state of South Carolina.
Okay.
Michelle, there was a question regarding the accelerated process and whether this was initiated by DOT or some of our legislators. Where did that?
Right, well, Councilman Dewar made an excellent point. There was a forum, a meeting that we had with the city, the legislative delegation, going into the public meeting. And, you know, Councilman Mary also pointed out that the schedule had been set prior to then. Well, not really, because we hadn't communicated it, that we were still on that path to determining what was available and what could be done. But that meeting kind of solidified that we were all on one accord, going in the same direction, recognizing the need to get this done quickly based on feedback, concerns from the public, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
I think we've about run the course of this thing, but just as a simple note, we just didn't know at the time. When we were given that accelerated schedule, it certainly sounded good to us because we were still thinking that we were operating off of sort of the verbal agreement we had where the grade would only be affected by about a foot or so. And I recognize that there's engineering imperatives that have changed that, but you know, the schedule sounded good when we thought we were still working with no more than a foot change in the grade.
All right, we're gonna close.
Let me just make one final comment. I want to thank you very much for coming. This is a very difficult decision that we have to make. It's probably one of the reasons why so few people get involved in the politics. I mean, it's
there's a lot more reasons than this.
It's easy to pass the resolutions, and it's sometimes even easy to pass the budget, but this impacts so many people in the city of Aiken. It's a tough decision. We're obviously groping for some waiver so we can not eliminate parking spaces and not adversely impact the houses on either side of the bridge. So I hope you understand that and realize the agony that we're going through in trying to make this decision. But I thank you for your patience and consideration.
Thank you.
And Dick has made a point. I somehow feel certain that you're going to work with us with those parking spaces.
Absolutely.
Somehow. So I'm relying on that. So.
All righty. Motion is, and I'm reading it off our screen up here, approval of SCDOT municipal agreement for rebuilding New York Street Bridge. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? That's Councilwoman Price, Councilman Moki.
It'd be easier to say who's opposed.
Councilwoman Diggs and Councilman Dewar and the mayor. All those opposed? Let the record show.
You only get one vote.
Just one.
One vote per round.
Councilman Mary voted for him. We understand the reasons that he expressed tonight. I would like to say before we close this that first of all, I want to commend Michelle and your staff and team for working on this. What DOT did in an incredible way for us was the design of the character with the wood to stay in the manner of Aiken, the safety issues, the expediency. We appreciate the cut through on the north side of the bridge, which was important to a lot of our citizens. And you're also, we didn't talk about it a lot tonight, but addressing the railroad erosion issue with the stormwater mitigation. So we appreciate that you're taking that in. And I'd certainly like to thank Commissioner Hardy. I've been on the phone with him twice today already, as a matter of fact, on this issue, trying to search things. So please convey to him that we appreciate his work into this. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that Senator Young, Senator Setzler, and our entire delegation certainly worked hard and got input. Senator Young in particular with his calls to the railroad to get that amount lowered. It was a big effort, and no one wants to see things that affect negatively any of our citizens, but I trust the SCDOT is going to work with us to certainly minimize that, and I appreciate our delegation and all they did on this. And I'll just say that they passed the ethics bill tonight, by the way. So
Yeah, they were in session very late.
congratulations to our delegation.
Yeah.
When you see this at home.
Let's see what's in it.
I think it'll be all right.
Do we have an estimate of what it's going to cost us to move all these utilities yet?
With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please stand up.